They objected to his electoral college vote. Now our area senators taking selfies at the inauguration. Even our mayor snags a seat. We track how change in Washington may change things here. Plus begging for the vaccine, frustration and anger over a coveted dose.
Vaccine supplies are just extremely limited.
And at a time of great change, could there be a name change at the Nelson? And what's the holdup? Why Kansas City is still struggling to find a way to honor King? Those stories and more straight ahead on Week in Review.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome, I'm Nick Haynes. Definitely no shortage of news to report this week. The biggest challenge, of course, is fitting it all inside 30 minutes. So we're asking our news reviewers to talk faster than normal and to be even more pithy with their insights. Is that even possible? Checking in with us on the big screen from KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo. From the investigation unit at 41 Action News, Kat Reed. From the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. And from the city's 100-year-old African-American newspaper, The Call, editor Eric Wesson. Now, America has a new leader this week, and the swearing in of Joe Biden as President of the United States also dominated our local newscasts in Kansas City. More than 1,000 people from our area were in Washington as Joe Biden became the nation's new president. Most of those were members of the Kansas and Missouri National Guard, but nearly every member of our bi-state delegation showed up too, even though they had objected to his electoral college vote. Our area senators taking selfies at the inauguration. 4 years ago, nearly 70 Democrats in Congress boycotted the swearing-in of President Trump. So what kind of signal does it send that Hawley and Marshall and almost every member of our bi-state delegation, with the exception, by the way, of Vicky Hartzler, decided to be there, Pete?
I think it sends that people are trying to move past January 6th and realize that Joe Biden is the president. And there are obviously millions of Americans that wish it would have turned out differently, but he's the president. So I think it's just a sense of saying, hey, this is the reality, like it or not, let's go.
So we're finally achieving unity and harmony, Kat Reed?
I think that is going to take some more time to rebuild some of the relationships. But I did want to point out quickly that Representative Hartzler, she did not attend, but did not give a reason as to why she wasn't attending. She did release a statement, though, recognizing President Biden and saying that he's promised to be a president for all Americans and that she's going to hold him to that.
I did notice this week, Dave Helling, that Josh Hawley singularly blocked the swift confirmation of President Biden's choice for Homeland Security. He and Roger Marshall were one of 10 senators who also voted against the Director of National Intelligence. So there's still some conflict taking place there between the current president and our bi-state delegation.
No question, particularly Josh Hawley and Roger Marshall. Senator Marshall is just getting his feet under him, so he may get a bit of a pass. But Josh Hawley's future, Nick, is fascinating. Because I think not only does he face concerns from Democrats in the Senate, but even some of his Republican colleagues are unhappy with his comportment, if you will, over the last couple of weeks. And so we'll have to watch carefully. Which committees does he end up on? Which bills get heard? I think the next 6 months are going to be critical for Josh Hawley, and it'll be fascinating to see how his colleagues in the Senate react.
Eric, this was a good news, bad news week for Josh Hawley. On the one hand, a new publisher steps forward to say they're going to publish his book for him after Simon & Schuster drops it. And then we have all these attorneys now saying they want to strip him of his law license. Well, they're doing the same with Ted Cruz, of course. But does that have any chance really of going anywhere?
No. It looks good, it's good posturing, but he hasn't done anything to violate any canon rules that would result in his license getting stripped. And you have to steal money from clients, lie to the courts. They don't usually get involved in political positions. People can't start lining up to run against him. I think right now, today, he's vulnerable, but in 4 years from now, I don't know if he's going to be.
Amid security concerns this week, Kansas Governor Laura Kelly closed down state office buildings on Inauguration Day, and the Kansas State House was actually off limits to the public for the entire week. There were extra security measures in place at the Capitol building in Jefferson City, and City Hall in Kansas City was shut down amid security concerns too. Pete Mundo, what do they expect to happen? I was looking on the Kansas side. I was looking at some video. There was just one man protesting outside the state capitol building saying, what happened to everybody?
I do think some of that was overblown, and you saw that play out. There was one guy out there in Topeka. He's wondering where everybody was. I would be wondering who he thought he was following there, to be frank. So, I mean, safety first. I understand all of that, but, you know, I'm all about doing that first. But it seemed to me like some of that was taken out of context in some way, shape, and form.
Why did they close down City Hall downtown, Kat?
Well, it was also part of the concern about security. I think that they considered that, but also in addition, committee chairs had the decision if they wanted to cancel their meetings, and the mayor was not going to be there because he was going to the inauguration. So I think it was kind of a combination of factors. And I know a lot of people wanted to watch the inauguration.
Yeah, as Kat Reed points out, the mayor was going to be in Washington. He accepted an invitation, by the way, to be there as part of a guest of Missouri Senator Roy Blunt. Some commentators claimed Lucas was in D.C. to schmooze and try to win influence with the new Biden administration. If that's the case, Eric, what does Lucas want from the Biden White House?
You know, it's kind of hard to say what he wants for the community. A lot of people think he was there schmoozing, as you said, to get ready to run for a congressional seat, maybe, or something along those lines. But if he was there for the community, I think housing would be one of the front runner conversations that he has, since Kansas City has a very serious housing problem.
And by the way, you just saw one of those pictures of the mayor, and he was next to Mayor Pete, now Transportation Secretary Dave Helling under Joe Biden.
Right, and so transportation money for the streetcar, for buses, that's always at the top of any mayor's agenda. But Nick, what Quinton Lucas wants is cash, cold hard cash.
We all want cash.
That's exactly
but we
right.
weren't there.
Because like most cities, Kansas City is running a serious, the mayor told us this week it may be close to $70 million deficit in the next year's budget because of COVID-related problems. So I'm sure he's there to argue for more money. He put out a statement with other mayors saying that the COVID stimulus package should have some money in it for direct payments to cities, not this sort of pass-through that we went through in 2020, which was so frustrating. Can I just take 10 seconds, by the way? We should tip our caps to Roy Blunt. You mentioned the other senators. Roy Blunt was one of the senators in charge of the inaugural ceremonies. He was outstanding. His remarks were right on. He was gracious. I think, you know, for all the criticism we lob sometimes at our senators, Roy Blunt, as I say, deserves the tip of the cap.
No, I mentioned that around 1,000 Kansas and Missouri National Guard troops were at the inauguration, but there were also nearly 50 members of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department who were asked to assist. That news comes as Police Chief Rick Smith informs Mayor Lucas that at least one member of the department was at the Trump rally on the day the Capitol was stormed. If they never broke through barriers, though, to penetrate government buildings. Is there anything unlawful about a Kansas City police officer being at the rally as a private citizen, Eric?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it was a bad optic to be a part of that. And what side was he there to cover? Was he there as the nonviolent protesters, or was he there with the violent protesters? But I'm just going to back up to one thing. One of the things that we talked about the mayor, and I mentioned this last week, was streetcar money. At some point in time in Kansas City, that streetcar is going to have to go east and west. So maybe he was there trying to make that connection as well. But as far as the police being there, I think one of the emails they sent out said, hey, if anybody's had any pictures of a police officer from Kansas City, Missouri doing something that wasn't right, show us that picture, give us a description of what it was, and they'll take care of it from there.
There is no evidence at this point, Pete Mundo, that officer, he or she, went inside of the Capitol building during that rally. But is it bad optics, as Eric points out?
No, because there's no way of knowing why the individual was there. I mean, we're assuming everybody was there for the same reason, to go to the Capitol and storm it. And I know people who were there. They were simply there to hear the president speak to that big of a crowd for the last time as the president. There was no intention for them on stopping the steal or anything like that. Without knowing the motives of why somebody was there and having no information on who the person is or what they did, this kind of seems like a witch hunt for some in Kansas City to identify this person. It doesn't seem right to me. If they broke the law, then different story. They shouldn't be serving the community. but there's not an ounce of evidence yet to point to on that to justify such a claim.
Wednesday was also moving day for President Trump. He departed Washington to take up residence at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida estate, where he will begin his post-presidency. A Missouri lawmaker has introduced a bill to name a highway after the outgoing president. Republican House member Mary Elizabeth Coleman wants to rename a portion of I-55 just south of St. Louis after him. Given that Republicans control every branch of government in Missouri, is that a slam dunk, Dave Helling?
Could be. I mean, this is happening in other states, by the way, Nick. There will be an effort to name things for the former president and recognize his service. Every president in this country has something named for him. So I don't think this is going to be a huge fight. The legacy of Donald Trump is another matter, and we will be arguing about that for a while.
Kat Reed, I did notice that there is a bill going through Congress, or trying to be introduced in Congress, that would actually ban virtually everything, quote, even a bench, from bearing President Trump's name. That's from a California Democratic House member. So this would fall at odds with that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I'm just not sure if that's going to move forward on the congressional level. There's a lot of important legislation to be done. And if people are talking about unifying, I don't know if that's the kind of legislation that they're going to pursue. It kind of remains to be seen.
Now, I know by even mentioning President Trump's name, we've lost at least one viewer. Linda wrote to me this week to say, after tomorrow, please do not cover anything about President Trump unless he's going to the hospital, jail, or the White House in the sky. I will immediately change stations. I'm assuming, Pete Mando, we can't please everyone in the media.
I would say she should probably not listen to my show, but that's another story. To your point, though, Nick, I mean, the whole idea of naming streets, which we've had this conversation here in Kansas City, right? What we should name, what we shouldn't name when it comes to streets. This is not, to me, something that is probably going to get done, but whether it's here in Kansas City or it's highways on the St. Louis side of the state, our legislatures have a lot of work to do. There's a lot on their plate. I think that naming streets and highways can be put on the back burner for a little bit.
And just so quickly, Nick, throw in, everyone is right about this, but next week, the Senate may take up the impeachment of the president, the former president, which may or may not be constitutional. You know, the idea that we can just sweep Donald Trump under the rug in the immediate future seems very problematic to me, and it does appear to me as well that Republicans particularly will have to come to grips with what he has meant for the party and whether he is the way forward or whether he was an aberration and will move back to a more traditional Republican Party as we understand.
And we haven't mentioned, Eric Wesson, Kansas City's bid to host his presidential library.
I have absolutely no comment. It's too cold here for that.
All right, next up.
Eric's sponsoring it.
All right, next up on Week in Review, amid all the hope that a new vaccine would ease our woes, the distribution of the shot is causing deep divisions this week. Let's start in Missouri, where the state is now offering the COVID shot to residents 65 and older and those with chronic health conditions. The only problem is they're struggling to get their hands on the vaccine.
Vaccine supplies are just extremely limited.
A warning at the top of the state's official website is making it clear many vaccination centers are still awaiting supplies from the federal government. Meanwhile, in Johnson County, the Shawnee Mission Post reports officials are begging the state for more vaccines, with claims they are still not able to inoculate most of its healthcare workers. Elsewhere in Kansas, a county health department attracts national news after its entire nursing staff refused to vaccinate people, claiming concerns about possible health effects. And in Wyandotte County, a Fox 4 News investigation reveals how residents are pretending to be health workers to jump the line.
Many of them were young and healthy and cutting in front of those most at risk. According to our whistleblower, on just a single day last week, 30 people arrived.
Okay, we in the media can have the habit, of course, of making things sound a whole lot worse than they really are. Are these an unrepresentative sample of what's actually going on? Or are they signs that deeper problems are ahead, Kat Reed?
I do not think they're unrepresentative. We are hearing about issues all over the country, people trying to jump the line to get the vaccine, issues with distribution. The one thing that seems a little bit less common is in Coffee County, the fact that the nurses will not be administering the vaccine and the county's going to have to pay to hire on other nurses to do it. I think that's a little bit less common across the country, but these are problems that are widespread, and there is some hope and some optimism that with a new administration and a new vaccine plan, perhaps some of these issues will be resolved. President Biden has said that in his first 100 days, they want to get 100 million shots. So I think that's going to be a really big challenge. And we're just going to have to see how some of the steps that the president is taking are going to play out.
Is part of the problem also, Dave Helling, just like when we had masks and government business shutdowns, that it depended on where you're living? And is that the case here too? Because it's happening at such a local level. We have in Bonner Springs, for instance, all the teachers I see are now getting the vaccine, whereas most other places around the metro, you cannot do that. Missouri now giving 65-year-olds and those with chronic conditions, yet on the Kansas side, only people over 65 are now getting it.
That was by design, Nick. The federal government said, hey, look, we'll help subsidize the development of the vaccine, but the distribution will be done by states, and each state is doing it differently, and no state really appears to be doing it well, some better than others. Kansas and Missouri are particular problems. The biggest problem appears to be supply, and until that gets rectified, it's going to be a scramble like you just reported.
Is that the biggest problem you hear from your listeners, Pete Mundo?
Yeah, and even Governor Kelly cited this as well, talking about phase 2, rolling it out this week, which is seniors 65 and over in some congregated living situations. I think she said that they would get next week 45,000 of the first doses when there's 1 million people that fit into that phase 2 category. So you're talking about less than 5%. It's a supply issue. I read that Amazon offered to help the current administration try to expedite this process. And I don't care who does it, but obviously time is of the essence.
Okay, we had the inauguration this week. We were also remembering and honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That was a day off for many of us this week. It's now been 53 years since the civil rights leader was assassinated on a motel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. While Dr. King remains one of the nation's most celebrated leaders, Kansas City is still struggling to find a way to honor him. More than a year after Kansas Cityans voted to remove his name from an historic street, there is still no consensus on what should happen now. A proposal to rename Swope Parkway, Volker Drive, and Blue Parkway after King has yet to win approval. So what is the holdup, Eric Wesson?
Well, some of the businesses on Swope Parkway, Swope Health Services, the shops on Blue Parkway have already been branded. And one of the things about Swope Health Services is if they change the address, then that means they would have to change all of their licensing addresses. And it's a lot of doctors, it's a lot of licensing going on there. And I think that there's just not the will within the community to do it outside of several civil rights organizations. But one of the things that they did do, Patrick Mahomes put some money behind it. I think they did clean up MLK Park over there on Brush Creek that very few people know exists. But I just don't think after 53 years that there's a lot of zeal, and especially after the name change when they took the name off of Paseo.
Kat.
A thing that the Parks Board mentioned was that they had these public listening sessions and there wasn't much input from the public, partially because that started right around the time of COVID. So people weren't really going to public listening sessions.
Well, many of you have great ideas for how to move forward. Longtime viewer Scott writes, my idea would be to name I-435 after Dr. King. It could be a bi-state project. There wouldn't really need to be any signs to replace Eric. Just add signs along 435 itself. Also, it wouldn't affect anybody's businesses. Is the city still interested in hearing ideas like this one?
There is the movement underway now to go back to naming the airport after Dr. King. I think Pat Clark and a group started a new petition drive to do that.
Speaking of renaming, is the Nelson Atkins Museum about to get a name change? A story in the Kansas City Star claims the museum is now reflecting on its association with William Rockhill Nelson, just days after the newspaper removed his name and face from its masthead. The Star had argued that its founder helped lay the foundation for decades of racial segregation in Kansas City. Kansas City's best-known art museum opened in 1933 and was bankrolled in large part by Nelson's estate. But just because you're reflecting on a possible name change doesn't mean it's going to happen. Other than a Star news story, what other pressure is there on the museum to make a change, Dave?
Well, I think there may be some internal pressure. The Star has removed William Rockhill Nelson's picture from what's called the masthead, which is sort of the identifying part of the editorial page. That grew out of our project in late 2020 about how we've covered issues of importance to the African American community. So my guess is that the people involved with the Nelson Atkins Museum have raised this issue, and they'll discuss it internally. It would be difficult, but not impossible to change the name of the museum that people, of course, in Kansas City have grown up with.
Of all of the things that we could be changing in Kansas City, how high is this on the priority list, Eric?
I would give it a 9 out of 1,000. People don't call me at the newspaper and say, hey, let's change the Atkins Nelson name, more so than they do, let's take that statue out from in front of the courthouse, the Andrew Jackson statue out from in front of the courthouses. I get more calls about that than I do the Nelson Atkins Museum.
But Pete, haven't we been conditioned for lots of change anyway? We had a thing called the J.C. Nichols Fountain. This time last year, it no longer exists. It's only the fountain on the plaza. We had Sprint Center, and now T-Mobile Center, and I see even Johnson County Community College stripping the name of the Carlson Center now, and it's now the Midwest Trust Center. So what difference would it make to our community if this institution were to change?
Well, I think it creates outrage on both sides, right? The outrage of the name must be changed because of the history behind somebody and what they did that was not good, versus the outrage of this doesn't change anything in anybody's lives. So what is the point, right? So it creates that kind of that lightning rod that's fun to talk about. But in the end, I mean, if the name gets changed, nobody's life does change.
And Nick, just quickly, Pete's absolutely right. Nobody's life is changed when you change the name of a fountain or a street. But the conversation can change lives. Talking about the full history of William Rock Hill Nelson and the full history of J.C. Nichols and the full history of Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, those conversations are still important to have.
I think the conversations are important. I'm skeptical if we'll actually see a change there, though.
And part of that is the fact that the Nelson estate still brings about $1.8 million a year to help fund programs at the Nelson.
You brought up a very good point. They get a lot of money through the foundations for the museums through those names. So if it's really serious, let's write some checks, refund some of that money back, and let's see how serious people really are about wanting to see a change.
Before we end our program, I wanted to dip into our mailbag. For all the remarkably impactful and political topics we discussed on last week's program, the story that prompted more feedback from our viewers than any other was our topic on whether Kansas City would go ahead with a victory parade if the Chiefs win back-to-back Super Bowls this year. Derek writes, I'd easily give up a parade for a guaranteed Chiefs Super Bowl win. Yolanda says Kansas City should be worrying about bigger problems. 176 people were savagely murdered in 2020, and the mayor spends time posting sunset pics on social media. 176 lives taken. Shame on the city. We also heard from the chief spokesman for the Kansas City Police Department, Sergeant Jake Bakina. He writes the decision of what type of celebration is held, if needed, is not one that we would make, but he wants all officers, he says, are prevented from taking vacation during that time. That is out of an abundance of caution, he says. If the events of the summer taught us anything, it's that when you need people, you need them now, and so we want to be prepared. Similarly, we did not allow any vacation time off around the election and this week around the inauguration. Dave Howling, you have also talked to the mayor, and he says any celebration will look different this year. But what does that actually mean?
My guess is something like we saw last night, by the way, in the inaugural, a virtual celebration, with cameras and video and Zooms and all the stuff we've become accustomed to, or maybe a delayed parade. You might be able to do something later in the year that would be unofficial because the NFL wouldn't be happy with it. But obviously those discussions are underway.
There's also talk about having a celebration at Arrowhead Stadium where there might be more space.
Yeah, I do think we would see some sort of celebration with the players, but not as many members of the public could be involved. But another thing I want to mention is that we could still see a lot of COVID cases if the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl, because people are going to gather at houses. They're going to have these informal parties for the Super Bowl. People start drinking, they take their masks off, they get a little bit closer. So even if you don't have a parade, a Super Bowl still could be a COVID concern for Kansas City.
Well, that could be happening every weekend. Take a look at this video footage. Here's what Kansas City looked like at a number of bars and restaurants after last week's Chiefs game. Pete, there was not a lot of masks being worn or social distancing taking place, and there wasn't even a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and that's going to happen again for the AFC Championship, and God willing, if when the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, it'll happen again then. So it's a tough line to walk. I mean, these businesses are getting crushed, and this is a chance to kind of make some of that money up. So you feel for them on that front. There's obviously a safety concern there as well that has to be has to be taken seriously. So it's a no-win for all sides of this, whether it's Lucas's side or the bar owner's side right now.
And you, Eric Wesson, were emphatic last week that regardless, Chiefs fans would celebrate, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and I was like, when I heard his announcement, I'm like, what a party pooper. I mean, people are going to do it, whether they do it in a bar, doing it in their homes. People are going to celebrate. That's significant. And it kind of takes us away from the past year.
I want to end the show, but I'm looking at Dave Helling's face. You don't seem to find any humor in Eric's comments there.
No, parades are great. Nobody should go to one and get sick. I mean, we're still in the middle. In fact, one of the frustrating things, Nick, I think, is the pandemic is worse now than it has ever been, ever. And the idea of gathering 500,000 people down along Grand to celebrate what we all hope will be a big Super Bowl victory is probably not a good one.
We can't have a Super Bowl party, but the mayor can go to the inauguration. And people weren't socially distanced at the inauguration. So
well, I think
all right.
Yeah.
On that, we will say our week has been reviewed. Checking in with us this week, 6 to 10 weekdays on KCMO Talk Radio. Pete Mundo from the investigation unit at 41 Action News, Kat Reed from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling, and on call at the Kansas City Call newspaper, Eric Wesson. And I'm Nick Haynes from all of us here at Kansas City PBS. Keep calm and carry on.